Now, South Africa's B20 leadership is working to foster global growth and recently handed a set of recommendations to G20 ministers. Business Day TV spoke to Sim Tshabalala, CEO of Standard Bank Group and chair of the B20 Finance and Infrastructure Task Force. They discussed the big three recommendations for growth, starting with the key breakthroughs made so far on finance and the B20. Here's that conversation.
At the highest level, I think the biggest breakthrough is that we've managed to get people from throughout the globe to agree on three sets of recommendations that we think, if implemented, will make a significant difference to the world. The impact thereof will be profound, pervasive, and will be long-lasting. And just to be able to get these people to agree on these actionable proposals has been a breakthrough.
Actionable proposals, which in particular? Because it's cost of capital, yes. There's the private sector, there's lots of moving parts here.
Okay, so there's three broad recommendations, and we could drill down into each one of them. The first one is to identify the fact that the world needs critical infrastructure. Now you might say, well, what do you mean by that? From an African perspective, we need roads, bridges, ports, data centers, so that the movement of people, ideas, and capital is easier. So that's critical infrastructure. You need to unlock that critical infrastructure. So for example, of every 10 projects that people identify, only one gets to be financed. Out of 10, only one gets to be financed. And so what do you need to unblock that? Series of recommendations, one of which is to say, why don't we enhance project preparation facilities? Give people more money and make it easier for them to apply for money to identify projects that actually work out, rather than spend a lot of time and effort and then fail at the end. So that's the first set of recommendations. The second one says the world needs $3 trillion a year for infrastructure. Africa needs 170 billion, but can only raise 85 billion. There's a missing 85 billion. How do you get that 85 billion? How do you get the private sector, the multilateral development finance institutions, and philanthropy to work in partnership to get this money? What are the sorts of things you need to do? You need to change some of the regulations like Basel, reduce the cost of capital, reduce the amount of capital needed for these projects because they're not as risky as people say they are, and thereby release the capital so that you can do more projects. And then the third and last set of things to do is, once you've got the money from the investors, how do you get it into the economy and into the bank accounts at Standard Bank or any one of our competitors in that value chain for SMEs, pay them on the day on which the money is due rather than 180 days later. You know the story about SMEs waiting forever to get paid. So those are the three things that can be done that will make a difference.
But how do you change that whole mindset about paying instead of 180 days? Because that's the big problem. Having a small business, you don't survive. You get the end of month one and you're screaming for the cash.
I think it takes, firstly, political will. So it takes governments and business to commit to doing the right thing, firstly. It takes people advocating for the rule of law to both government and to business. Please respect your contracts and please make sure that people get paid on time. Number three, get rid of rent seeking and unproductive rents in processes so that honest people don't have middlemen and women between them and the project. Lastly, have a set of IT and processes and systems and rules, IT processes and rules that insist that the money must hit one account on a particular day and hit the account of the SME on a particular day through an efficient system rather than long processes with many people in the middle, again, giving rise to unproductive rents.
Yeah.
So make it smooth.
And what sort of cooperation has there been from other B20 partners? Because we know what South Africa wants, we know what Africa wants, but what does Europe want and the United States? Has there been broad cooperation? I mean, there are proposals now on the table. This is great.
So Ray, here's something to be proud of as a South African. We have got three themes in the G20 as the president of the G20. It's solidarity, it's sustainability, and it is equity. And those three themes have animated the work in the B20 as well as certainly in the infrastructure and finance task force. In choosing the notion of solidarity, we've made sure that not only do we have a high contingent of Americans on our task force, we've got a high contingent of South Africans, a high contingent of Brazilians, people from the United Kingdom, from China, from Russia. Believe it or not, of those 170 people, they come from all parts of the world, and as I say, with a large contingent from the United States. And that large group of people are led by a set of co-chairs. There are 8 of them. They range from Daniel Pinto, the vice chairman of JP Morgan, Ann Richards, the CEO of Fidelity International, Benjamin Hung, the president of Standard Chartered International, and various other people, including Strive Masiwa, Mr. Dio from Meridium, based in France, Paris, Samala Zubaru, the president of the Africa Finance Corporation. The point is, people representing the continent and representing the globe, very, very senior people. Those two groupings, through a series of meetings during the first half of the year, have arrived at a document that is 10,000 words long, resulting in those 3 actionable recommendations, which any reasonable person, when reading them, would say, I would like to implement as soon as it's reasonably practical. Sure. So that is what has happened in that period of 6 months. And let me just add this. We have had incredible work done by the B20 Secretariat. I think, Ray, South Africa ought to know that that group of people have been champions.
What worries me a little bit is you've got your B20 recommendations, they go off to the G20.
Yes.
Are there any areas where you say these are recommendations, but they have to be givens? We can't negotiate on this anymore because we've got jobs on the line, we've got Africa's well-being on the line. Are there any non-negotiables?
Unfortunately, it's not given to us to be that prescriptive. The best we can do, and we've tried to do that, is make sure that we take recommendations that have come from B20s before us and continue to advocate for the implementation of things that they've recommended and then keep adding to them. The most important thing in this process is not so much to hold people accountable like you suggest, but to make sure that the dialogue is happening so that the rules do change, the implementation does happen. And so I wish I could say to you that yes, in each of the recommendations there are key performance indicators, and that there's a particular entity that is responsible and will be measured on that indicator. We've got that in our recommendations, but they are just signposts. They're not things that you can, at Standard Bank, for example, if I as the chief executive fail to meet particular targets, I'll be asked to resign. You can't do that in this type of arrangement, unfortunately.
Yeah.
What you can do, though, is you can advocate, as we hereby do so. Our conversation is part of the advocacy. The conversation we had with Minister Lamola is advocacy. I'm sure will be reading that thick document as he flies to the next destination. We hope the Ministry of Finance will have a look at these things. We hope multilateral agencies will hear these, think about them, implement them. We hope ratings agencies will hear the advocacy, etc. So that's the real point. It's not so much that you can agree KPIs with somebody and then fire them if they fail to meet the KPIs.
Green flags when it comes to job creation. Have you seen anything? Because our country, this has been South Africa and also many African countries, we are desperate for job creation. In these recommendations, are there things that are sitting there that could say, if accepted, if the plan goes ahead, we'll see jobs?
Yes, there's a task force that has been very focused on this, and they make a set of recommendations that relate to the regulatory environment, the training that is necessary, the rules that need to be put in place. And hopefully if and when those recommendations are put in place, together indeed with the other recommendations in, for example, the digital task force, where they make recommendations about how to use technology and what type of human capital we need for that. In which case, if we're to implement those things, South Africa, for example, could leapfrog, just as East Africa has leapfrogged, having put in place systems and processes in their education system that produce people that are very fit for purpose for a digital economy. And hey, all of a sudden, all the tech companies have their head offices in Nairobi as a consequence of that. So yes, our task force, together with other task forces, have got a thread of recommendations that thread right across the task forces that will result in greater job creation.
Now, as Sim Tshabalala pointed out, the B20 task forces have worked collectively to deliver actionable, context-specific proposals. One of those groups, the Energy Mix and Just Transition Task Force, which focused on its key recommendations on finance, industrialization, jobs and infrastructure. We spoke to Daniel Mminele, who chairs that task force, about what this means in practice.
Finance is about really mobilizing at scale affordable finance, so the right amounts at the right price on the right terms to power the energy transitions, because without finance we won't make progress with regard to the various projects that needs to be implemented. So very important, because if you just by way of illustration, emerging economies need about 1.6 trillion each year to 2030 for sustainable energy, and at the moment we're getting about 25% of it. So very, very important to make sure that we mobilize finance in the right way, using new innovative instruments, blended finance, such that we are able to crowd in particular, the large pools that sit in the private sector to help power the energy transitions. With regard to industrialization and jobs, that's about recognizing that the transitions provide a gigantic opportunity to retool our economies, to invest, to create jobs, so that basically the issues around as and when the value chains that are associated with the fossil fuel industry are tapering off, we ramp up the value chains that are based on sustainable technologies and energy, such that as we migrate economies and societies to low carbon and make them more climate resilient, we actually with that combine almost developing a new growth and development model to power that. And just to give you a practical example of what I'm talking about when we're talking about industrialization, if you think about emerging economies, in particular the African continent, holding 70% of the critical minerals that are needed to transition. At this point in time, if you take the example of the DRC, for instance, and the role of cobalt, we're transporting all those minerals that are being taken elsewhere, whereas battery systems, solutions could be on the continent. We could be moving from extraction to value creation and creating jobs. So that's an important second aspect of it. And the third one, which is around modernizing infrastructure, speaks to modernizing the grid, which is obviously the backbone for resilient energy infrastructure. There is something like 80 million kilometers of transmission lines that are needed by 2040. So those are the recommendations that we're making. We've been very careful to ensure that they're targeted, they're actionable, and with that we have also suggested a number of policy actions that will underpin that.